5 terrifying, true scary stories from Yosemite. The haunting adventures you can't unsee. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden hue over the sprawling landscapes of Yosemite National Park. 5 friends, Jake, Sarah, Mike, Emily, and Tom, huddled around a weathered wooden table at the edge of town. Excitement bubbling in the air as they finalized their plans for the weekend camping trip. Each of them brought their own unique vibe to the group. Jake, the adventurous spirit, always eager to tackle the next challenge. Sarah, the planner, with her meticulous list of supplies. Mike, the joker, whose humor kept spirits high. Emily, the nature enthusiast, who dreamed of capturing the perfect sunset photograph. And Tom, the cautious one, who often found himself lost in thought, contemplating the what-ifs. Okay, so we've got the tents, sleeping bags, and plenty of marshmallows for s'mores, Sarah declared, her voice brimming with enthusiasm as she flipped through her notepad. What else do we need? Don't forget the flashlights. I want to be able to see those giant bears. Mike chimed in, laughter dancing in his eyes. He loved exaggerating the dangers of the wild, though deep down he relished the thrill of the unknown. I say we embrace the wild. Who knows what kind of adventure awaits us? Jake replied, his eyes gleaming with the promise of freedom. He was already imagining the hikes they would embark on, the stories they would tell around the campfire, and the memories they would create. As they packed their supplies into the back of Tom's SUV, a chill breeze rustled through the trees, sending a shiver down Emily's spine. She looked up, momentarily lost in the beauty of the towering pines that framed the horizon. It's going to be perfect, she murmured, envisioning herself surrounded by nature's untouched beauty. But just as their excitement reached its peak, they were interrupted by the appearance of an elderly ranger. His face weathered by years spent under the sun and a deep frown etched on his brow. His green uniform blended into the forest backdrop, making him appear as if he had emerged from the wilderness itself. He approached the group with a sense of urgency. "Hey there, folks," he began, his voice gravelly and grave. "I couldn't help but overhear your plans. Yosemite may look inviting, but it can be treacherous. You're not the first group to venture out there, and you won't be the last to get lost." The friends exchanged glances, a mix of amusement and concern flashing across their faces. Mike smirked and nudged Tom. "See, I told you this place is haunted by the ghosts of lost hikers," he joked, lightening the mood. The ranger continued, ignoring the jest. "Just last summer, 3 experienced hikers disappeared without a trace. Search teams scoured the woods for weeks, but all they found were their belongings. It's easy to lose your way out there. The trails can shift, the weather can turn, and the forest..." He paused, his gaze drifting toward the trees, as if recalling memories best left buried. "The forest can be deceptive." Jake raised an eyebrow, leaning forward with interest. "What happened to them?" "They were never found," the ranger replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The forest swallowed them whole, and it's not the first time it's happened." His eyes locked onto each of theirs, an unsettling intensity behind them. "Don't think you're invincible. Respect the wilderness, or it'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." A tense silence fell over the group. Tom glanced at his friends, his expression wavering between concern and skepticism. But Sarah, ever the optimist, shrugged it off. "It's just a spooky story to scare tourists," she said, a forced laugh escaping her lips. "We'll be fine. We have maps, we have each other, and we've got Tom." "Yeah, I'm the designated safety guy." Tom grinned weakly, but his heart wasn't in it. As the ranger turned to leave, he called back, "Just remember, if you hear the whispering of the pines at night, it's not the wind, it's something else." The group chuckled uneasily, dismissing the old ranger's words as mere folklore. "Come on, let's go," Jake urged, eager to hit the road. They piled into the SUV, the laughter returning as they set off for the park. Yet, as they drove deeper into the mountains, the road twisted and turned, shadows creeping in around them. The vibrant colors of the sunset gradually faded into an inky darkness, and the trees loomed closer, towering like ancient sentinels. Yosemite was breathtaking. The granite cliffs rose majestically, and waterfalls cascaded down, their beauty untouched by time. However, beneath this serene facade lay an undercurrent of tension, a sense that the wilderness was alive and watching. The friends arrived at their campsite, the moon casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. They set up their tents amidst the whispering pines, the rustle of leaves echoing like a distant conversation. Despite the initial excitement, a subtle unease began to settle in, barely noticeable but present, like a chill that tickled the back of their necks. As they gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, they couldn't shake the feeling that something lurked in the shadows of the forest. Waiting, watching, and whispering secrets only the pines understood. The night deepened, and the stars twinkled above, beautiful yet distant, as if warning them of the dangers that lay ahead. Little did they know, their adventure was only just beginning, and the true horrors of the wilderness awaited them under the watchful gaze of the moon. Story 1. The Whispering Pines. As the fire crackled and the marshmallows roasted to a golden brown, the friends settled comfortably into their surroundings, laughter and stories flowing freely. The night deepened, and with it came the cool mountain air, enveloping them like a gentle embrace. They had chosen their campsite wisely, nestled near a grove of towering pine trees, known among locals for the strange sounds that often echoed through the forest. "Did you guys know that this area is famous for its whispers?" Mike teased, his voice a playful sing-song. "They say that at night, the trees start talking to each other, and if you listen closely, you can hear them calling your name." "Don't start with that nonsense," Sarah replied, rolling her eyes, though the hint of apprehension in her tone was unmistakable. "It's just the wind. Trees creak and crack, there's nothing eerie about it." "Maybe not for you, but I'm telling you." Mike pressed, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "The locals say it's the spirits of lost hikers trying to find their way home." "Oh, come on," Jake laughed, throwing a marshmallow at Mike, who ducked, the sugary treat splattering against a nearby tree. "You're just trying to scare us. We're all good friends here, and nothing is going to happen tonight. Right, Tom?" Right," Tom replied, though his voice held a note of uncertainty. He had heard the stories too. The ranger's warning echoed in his mind, and a shiver ran down his spine. As the night wore on and the fire burned low, the group grew quiet, the night settling in with a blanket of silence. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows against the trees, creating an almost hypnotic atmosphere. But then, as if the forest had come alive, a faint whisper floated through the air, barely audible but distinct enough to be unsettling. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. "Hear what?" Sarah asked, leaning closer to the fire, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Whispers," Emily insisted, straining to listen. "I swear I heard someone calling my name." Tom glanced towards the grove of pines, shadows dancing in the moonlight. "It's probably just the wind," he said, but his heart raced as he felt the chill creep into his bones. The whispering grew louder, rising and falling like a soft breeze that wrapped around them, almost melodic yet eerie. It called out in gentle tones, Emily, Jake, Sarah, the voices seemingly beckoning each of them by name. "Okay, that's definitely not just the wind," Jake said, a grin fading from his face. "What the hell is that?" "Let's go check it out," Mike suggested, standing up abruptly, his curiosity piqued. "It's probably just some animals or, I don't know, some kids messing around." "Are you serious?" Sarah exclaimed, her voice trembling slightly. "What if it's something dangerous?" "Don't be a chicken," Mike challenged, gesturing toward the grove with a bravado that masked his own unease. "We're not scared of some silly whispers, are we?" With a mixture of dread and excitement, the group exchanged glances, each friend contemplating the decision that lay before them. The allure of the unknown was strong, and despite their apprehensions, the thought of discovering the source of the whispers was irresistible. "Okay, let's do it," Jake finally said, his adventurous spirit igniting once more. "But we stick together. No splitting up." With their hearts racing, they grabbed their flashlights and made their way towards the grove of pine trees. The moment they stepped away from the warmth of the fire, an eerie stillness enveloped them. The whispers grew fainter but remained persistent, urging them deeper into the shadows. As they approached the trees, the moonlight trickled through the branches, casting intricate patterns on the ground. The air felt charged, heavy with anticipation. "This is a terrible idea," Tom muttered under his breath, trying to quell the unease in his stomach. "Keep going, we're almost there," Mike urged, the thrill of the moment propelling him forward. Suddenly, the whispering escalated, echoing around them, wrapping them in a cocoon of sound. The voices became clearer. "Come to us. Help us." A chilling chant that sent shivers down their spines. The group stopped, frozen in place. "What if it's true? What if it really is lost hikers?" Emily whispered, her voice quivering. Just then, a shadow flitted between the trees, causing them to jump back. A dark figure loomed amidst the pines, barely visible, its shape undefined but undeniably present. Fear seized their hearts as they stood paralyzed, breathless. "Who's there?" Jake called out, trying to sound brave, but his voice cracked, betraying the terror they all felt. The figure turned, and for a brief moment, they saw it, tall and thin, with elongated limbs and an unsettlingly blank face. A soft, chilling laugh echoed through the grove, sending a wave of dread washing over them. "What is that?" Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with terror. In a split second, the figure darted away, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. The whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tempest. Panic erupted, and the friends turned on their heels, racing back towards the campsite, fear propelling them forward. They stumbled through the brush, branches scratching at their arms and faces as they pushed through the dense undergrowth. The laughter of the figure echoed behind them, blending with the sinister whispers, creating a haunting symphony that urged them to run faster. When they finally burst back into the clearing, their hearts pounding in their chests, they collapsed around the campfire, gasping for breath. The light flickered, illuminating their faces, now pale with shock and disbelief. "What just happened?" Tom breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know," Jake stammered, his bravado shattered. "That was not okay." "Did you see it?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What was that thing?" "It was just a figment of our imagination," Mike tried to rationalize, though his voice quivered. "We must have spooked ourselves." "Right," Sarah said, her voice shaky. "It was just the whispers playing tricks on us." But deep down, each of them felt an unsettling truth. They had encountered something that night, something that lurked within the shadows of the pines. The feeling of being watched lingered, and as they sat around the dying fire, the laughter and camaraderie of earlier faded into the cold night air. As the fire flickered out, darkness enveloped them, and the whispers of the pines carried on, echoing through the silence, a chilling reminder of the shadows that danced just beyond their sight. Each friend felt the weight of the night pressing down on them, the knowledge that the wilderness was not just a playground, but a realm filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered. But for now, they rationalized it all away, convincing themselves it was just their imagination playing tricks. Yet, in their hearts, they knew that the forest had shown them a glimpse of something far more sinister than they were willing to accept. Story 2: Lost in the Woods. After the unsettling events of the previous night, the group decided to shake off the fear with a day of hiking. However, Jake and Sarah felt the urge to break away from the rest of the group. The thrill of adventure was calling to them, and they agreed to explore a more secluded area of Yosemite National Park. "Come on, it'll be fun. Just a little detour," Jake said, flashing his infectious smile as he strapped on his backpack. Sarah hesitated, glancing back at the trail where their friends were gathering their gear. "Are you sure? The ranger said it's easy to get lost out here." "Don't worry, we'll be careful. We'll just wander a little and come back before dark. What's the worst that could happen?" Jake's charm and enthusiasm were hard to resist. With a nod of agreement, they set off down an unmarked path that led deeper into the woods. The sunlight filtered through the thick canopy of trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. They laughed and joked, taking pictures and enjoying the tranquility of the secluded wilderness. However, as they ventured farther from the marked trail, the landscape began to change. The cheerful sounds of birds chirping were replaced by an eerie stillness that hung in the air. The tall trees seemed to loom over them, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers reaching out into the sky. A sense of foreboding washed over Sarah, but she pushed it aside, determined to enjoy their adventure. After what felt like hours of wandering, Sarah finally spoke up. "Jake, I think we should head back. It's starting to look familiar, but I can't be sure." Jake frowned, glancing around. "We'll just go a little further. There has to be a viewpoint or something up ahead. Besides, we can't be too far off the main trail." As the path narrowed and the trees grew denser, Sarah's anxiety increased. Maybe we should turn back now. It's getting late, and the others will be wondering where we are. With a reluctant sigh, Jake conceded, and they began retracing their steps. But with each turn, the surroundings felt unfamiliar, and the oppressive silence deepened. The friendly sunlight that had once illuminated their path began to fade, and shadows crept through the trees, swallowing the light whole. "Jake, I think we're lost," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. He stopped, his heart racing. "No way. We just need to find a landmark, something to guide us back." They turned back again, but the woods seemed to twist and shift, making every direction feel like a maze. Panic bubbled in Sarah's chest as the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the forest into twilight. Just as they were about to call out for help, a sound cut through the stillness. A branch snapped in the distance. "Did you hear that?" Jake's voice was low, anxiety creeping in. "Yeah, it came from over there." Sarah pointed towards the darkening woods, her instincts screaming at her to run. "Let's go back." As they turned, they heard it again, heavy footsteps crunching through the underbrush. The reality of their situation settled heavily on them. They were completely alone, with the shadows growing deeper around them. "Keep moving," Jake urged, his pulse quickening. The echoes of the footsteps seemed to stalk them, each crack of a twig sending a jolt of fear coursing through their bodies. They stumbled through the underbrush, desperately trying to follow the sounds of the trail they had taken. The fear of the unknown gnawed at them, amplifying every rustle and whisper in the forest. As the darkness enveloped them, they could no longer tell which direction they had come from. "Jake, I think we should just find a place to wait it out until morning," Sarah suggested, her voice shaking. "We can't keep running blindly through here." Okay, let's find a spot," he agreed, trying to suppress his own panic. Just then, they stumbled into a small clearing and were shocked to find an abandoned campsite. Old gear lay scattered around, rusting and overgrown with weeds. A fire pit lay dormant, the remnants of past flames still visible in the ash. "Maybe we can find something useful here," Jake said, trying to keep hope alive. As they rummaged through the remains, Sarah's eyes caught something on the trees surrounding the campsite. Strange markings carved into the bark. They were crude and jagged, resembling a mix of symbols and strange runes. An icy chill ran down her spine. "Jake, look at these." He turned, his face paling as he stepped closer to inspect the markings. "What do you think they mean?" "I have no idea, but it doesn't feel right," she replied, glancing nervously over her shoulder. The feeling of being watched crept back, more intense than ever. Suddenly, a rustling sound echoed from the tree line, followed by a faint whisper, "Help us." The familiar echo of voices sent shivers racing down their spines. "Let's go," Jake urged, his eyes wide with fear as he grabbed Sarah's hand. They sprinted out of the clearing, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging through their veins. "Where do we go? We're still lost," Sarah cried, glancing back at the campsite. "Just keep moving," Jake shouted, his voice cutting through the night. They dodged trees and underbrush, the sounds of footsteps following closely behind them. It was as if the forest itself had come alive, determined to keep them trapped. They pushed through the dense foliage, branches clawing at their skin as they ran. Just as despair began to settle in, they spotted a faint glow through the trees, a light flickering in the distance. "There," Sarah shouted, pointing toward the light. "Maybe it's the main trail." With renewed determination, they raced towards the light, fear fueling their legs. The whispers and footsteps faded behind them, but a deep-rooted feeling told them they weren't alone. As they broke through the thicket, they found themselves back at the main trail, where their friends were anxiously searching for them. "Jake? Sarah?" Emily called, relief flooding her voice as she ran to embrace them. "We thought we lost you." "Yeah, we almost did," Jake panted, glancing back into the woods, a sense of dread still lingering in his chest. "What happened?" Tom asked, eyes wide. "We got lost," Sarah began, but the fear etched on her face was enough for her friends to understand. They hurried back to camp, the weight of their experience hanging heavy in the air. As they settled around the campfire, their laughter and chatter masked the lingering fear. However, the feeling of being followed never left Jake and Sarah. Later that night, as they lay in their tents, they could hear whispers drifting through the trees. a haunting reminder of their experience. The woods held secrets, dark ones, that they had barely escaped. The thought of those strange markings and the ominous voices filled their minds, leaving them restless and on edge. Outside, the forest was alive with sounds, and deep down, they knew they were not alone, even in the safety of their camp. The wilderness had its eyes on them, watching, waiting for the next moment to strike. Story 3. The Shadow in the Tent. The crackling campfire flickered like a heartbeat, casting dancing shadows on the faces of Jake, Sarah, Mike, Emily, and Tom as they huddled close, warmth radiating around them. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the unmistakable smokiness of the fire, while the soft rustle of leaves whispered secrets from the surrounding woods. "Okay, I've got one," Mike said, leaning in closer, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "This is about the shadow man who roams these woods. They say he appears at night, lurking near campsites and watching those who dare to camp in his territory." The others leaned in, captivated. "What happens?" Sarah prompted, a mix of excitement and fear sparking in her voice. "He preys on the unsuspecting, slipping into their tents while they sleep. You won't even know he's there until it's too late. They say you can feel his icy breath on your neck, paralyzing you with fear." Mike continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Jake chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, Mike. That's just a campfire story. I'd like to see this shadow man try to get to me." "Yeah, right," Emily said, rolling her eyes. "I'd like to see him get past my karate moves." They laughed, the sound ringing through the night, but a twinge of unease settled over them. The forest seemed to listen, an audience to their tales of horror. As the night wore on, their laughter faded, replaced by the quiet sounds of nature. One by one, they retreated into their tents, tired from the day's adventures. Mike lay in his sleeping bag, the warmth enveloping him, but as the sounds of the forest settled into a soothing lullaby, he felt a strange tension creep into the air. Hours later, Mike awoke suddenly, jolted by an unshakable feeling of being watched. Heart racing, he blinked in the dark, scanning the interior of the tent, but everything was still and silent. Just as he was about to drift back to sleep, he noticed a dark figure hovering near the entrance of the tent. His blood ran cold as he stared at the silhouette, a shape that seemed to absorb all the light around it. It stood unnaturally still, its form indistinct and shifting like smoke. "Guys," he whispered, his voice barely escaping his throat. He reached out, nudging Jake, but there was no response. "Jake, Sarah, wake up." Panic surged as he shook them, but they remained oblivious to his fear, trapped in a deep sleep. The figure loomed closer, inching its way toward him. Mike's breath caught in his throat as he felt a chill sweep through the tent, settling over him like a heavy blanket. It was as if the temperature had dropped dramatically, and he could see his own breath fogging in the air. The shadow leaned closer, and Mike felt a cold breath against the back of his neck, a sensation that sent icy tendrils of fear racing through him. He froze, unable to move or scream, caught in a paralyzing grip of terror. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused to respond. Time felt like it had warped. Every second stretched into eternity as the figure hovered over him, a silent observer. It had no face, no features, just an overwhelming presence that radiated dread. Mike's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in the suffocating silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shadow retreated, dissolving back into the darkness. With a sudden surge of strength, Mike threw off his sleeping bag, fumbling with the zipper of the tent as he burst outside, gasping for fresh air. The cool night air hit him like a slap, but it didn't ease the terror clawing at his insides. He stumbled away from the tent, adrenaline surging through him, his eyes wide as he scanned the campsite for any sign of the shadow. The fire had burned down to embers, casting faint light that flickered in the darkness. "Mike? What's wrong?" Sarah's voice broke through the veil of fear, and she poked her head out of the tent, sleep still in her eyes. "Did you see it?" "The shadow, it was right here," he stammered, his voice trembling. "It was hovering over me." The rest of the group began to emerge, bleary-eyed and confused. "What are you talking about?" Jake asked, rubbing his eyes. "What happened?" "There was a figure," Mike insisted, his voice urgent. "It was right by the tent, and I felt its breath on my neck. Emily stepped forward, concern etched on her face. Mike, you must have been dreaming. You know how vivid dreams can be out here. It's just the stories we've been telling. No, it was real. Mike's voice was rising in panic, desperation coloring his words. I wasn't dreaming. It felt so real. I swear it was right here. As he spoke, his friends exchanged glances, a mix of skepticism and concern evident on their faces. Let's just check the area, Jake suggested, trying to bring some calm to the situation. We can't ignore this. With a reluctant nod, they grabbed flashlights and cautiously stepped into the surrounding darkness, illuminating the area near the tents. The beam of light cut through the shadows, revealing nothing but the usual sights of the campsite: the scattered rocks, the distant trees, and the empty woods. There's nothing here, Mike, Tom said, his voice steady but laced with doubt. You're probably just spooked from the stories. Yeah, it's just your mind playing tricks on you, Sarah added gently, trying to soothe him. But Mike shook his head vigorously, his heart still racing. I know what I saw. It was there. I felt it. With the reassurance of his friend's presence, they decided to return to the campfire, hoping that the warmth of the flames would ease Mike's frayed nerves. They settled around the dying fire, the embers glowing like tiny stars against the vast night sky. As they sat, the earlier laughter had transformed into a hushed conversation. The shadow that had invaded Mike's dreams lingered in their minds, casting a pall over the once joyous gathering. Each person recalled Mike's account, their hearts heavy with unspoken fears. Maybe we should all sleep together tonight, Emily suggested, her voice wavering slightly, just to be safe. The group agreed, and they huddled close, the flickering light providing a sense of security. Mike, still shaken, couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow might return. As the night wore on, he found himself constantly glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the dark. As dawn began to break, the first light of morning chased away the shadows of the night. They slowly emerged from their makeshift beds, exhaustion etched on their faces, but with a sense of relief that the terror had passed. Yet, as they gathered their gear, an unsettling realization settled over them. There was no evidence of the shadow, no sign that anything unusual had happened, no lingering chill in the air. Just the ordinary sights of a beautiful morning in Yosemite. Maybe it was just a nightmare, Jake suggested, trying to sound casual, but the worry in his voice was evident. Yeah, just a bad dream, Mike echoed, but the way he spoke hinted at uncertainty. The fear still churned within him, a dark shadow that would linger long after the sun had risen. As they set off for another day of adventures, the bond between them grew stronger, forged in the crucible of fear. But the memories of the shadow in the tent remained, a haunting echo of the unknown lurking just beyond the safety of their campfire light. The woods held secrets, and with every rustle of the trees, they knew they were not alone. Story 4: The Haunted Trail. With the sun shining bright and spirits high, the group gathered for breakfast, energized by the thrill of the adventures that lay ahead. After sharing stories of their eerie encounters from the previous nights, they decided it was time to explore a famous hiking trail, rumored to be haunted, the Raven's Ridge Trail, known among locals for its chilling tales of a hiker who had tragically lost his life there many years ago. Jake took the lead, brandishing a worn-out map that he had hastily drawn up after researching the trail online. "This is the path," he proclaimed with enthusiasm, his confidence radiating like the sun. "They say the spirit of the hiker still wanders these woods looking for something he lost." "Great," Emily replied, half seriously, rolling her eyes. "Just what we need, a ghost leading us to our doom." "Come on, Em. What's the worst that could happen?" Tom teased, his laughter infectious, easing the tension that clung to the air. They set off, the vibrant greens of the forest enveloping them, the air rich with the scent of damp earth and pine. As they hiked deeper into the woods, the trail twisted and turned, and the trees grew denser. The chatter and laughter began to fade as an eerie silence wrapped around them. As they made their way along the path, strange phenomena began to occur. At one point, they noticed that the path seemed to shift beneath their feet. One moment it was there, and the next, it appeared to vanish into a thick thicket of bushes. "Didn't we just pass this spot?" Mike asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Maybe we're just going in circles," Jake shrugged, trying to downplay their unease. But the others exchanged worried glances, a sense of foreboding creeping into their minds. Suddenly, the weather took a dramatic turn. Dark clouds gathered overhead, blotting out the sun and sending a chill through the air. The wind picked up, rustling the trees ominously. "This is strange," Sarah remarked, glancing at the sky. "It wasn't supposed to rain today." Before they could discuss it further, the storm unleashed its fury. A torrential downpour began, and the group hurriedly sought shelter beneath a large, gnarled oak tree. "We should wait it out," Jake suggested, but the wind howled louder, drowning out their voices. Just as quickly as they had found refuge, the storm grew fiercer. The ground turned slick and treacherous, and as the wind whipped through the trees, a bolt of lightning illuminated the sky, casting eerie shadows that danced among the branches. It was then that panic erupted as the group, now disoriented, found themselves separated. "Emily!" Mike shouted, but his voice was lost in the roar of the storm. The heavy rain masked the sounds of their cries, and soon, Emily found herself alone, disoriented and frightened. The wind seemed to whisper her name, beckoning her deeper into the darkening woods. As she stumbled forward, an unseen force seemed to guide her down a narrow, treacherous path. Each step felt both intentional and instinctive, as if something was compelling her to follow the path laid out before her. The air around her shifted. The rain felt warmer, almost comforting, and yet the shadows grew darker, weaving through the trees like restless spirits. "Turn back, Emily," a voice echoed in her mind, soft yet firm. It resonated deep within her, causing her to halt mid-step. Heart-pounding, she looked around, half expecting to see someone there, but the path was deserted. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The wind howled in response, drowning her words, and the voice came again, more insistent this time. "Turn back. This is not your path." Frantically, Emily felt the weight of an invisible presence, urging her to flee. As she hesitated, the dark shadows surrounding her deepened, swirling around her like a tempest. But a spark of determination ignited within her. She turned, bolting back the way she had come, retracing her steps through the rain-soaked earth. Meanwhile, Jake, Tom, and Sarah were frantically searching for her, calling out her name as they fought against the wind and rain. The world around them felt surreal, disorienting, as the storm raged on, obscuring their vision. "Emily!" Sarah shouted, panic rising in her voice. "We have to find her." Just when they thought all hope was lost, they heard a faint cry in the distance. "This way," Mike yelled, leading them toward the sound, driven by the desperate hope that it was Emily. After what felt like an eternity, they spotted her, standing at the edge of a clearing, soaked to the bone, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and something else, something they couldn't quite place. "Emily!" Jake rushed toward her, relief flooding through him as he enveloped her in a tight embrace. "We were so worried. Are you okay?" She nodded, but there was an unsettling look in her eyes. I think I saw something. I heard a voice telling me to turn back." "What do you mean?" Tom asked, his expression shifting from relief to concern. "I don't know. It was like it was guiding me, but then it told me to run. I just felt this connection, like something was pulling me deeper into the woods," she said, her voice trembling as she glanced over her shoulder toward the trees. "Let's get out of here," Jake urged, glancing nervously at the dark forest surrounding them. As they made their way back, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, an unnerving sensation prickling at the back of her neck. As they reached their campsite, the storm began to dissipate, the clouds slowly parting to reveal the evening sky painted with hues of orange and pink. Yet something felt off. The air was thick with an unseen tension, and Emily could sense it more than the others. As they settled back at their camp, Emily noticed a strange mark on her arm, a dark bruise-like symbol that hadn't been there before. She stared at it in disbelief, tracing her fingers over the strange shape, her heart racing. "Guys, what is this?" The others crowded around, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. "What happened out there?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Emily admitted, her voice shaky. "It's like something followed me back. It's connected to the spirit. I can feel it." The group exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of Emily's words settling heavily among them. They had come to the woods seeking adventure, but now they found themselves intertwined with something much darker. A force that left its mark on their very souls. As they huddled together around the campfire, the once pleasant tales of the haunted trail turned into hushed whispers of fear and uncertainty. The evening wore on, but the camaraderie they had shared before now felt fragile, overshadowed by the mysteries of the forest and the specter of the spirit that lingered just beyond their campfire light. The night deepened, the shadows crept closer, and the haunting feeling of being watched remained, a reminder that in these woods, they were not alone. Story 5: The Vanishing Hiker. After a restless night filled with whispers of the unknown, the friends woke up to a crisp morning that promised clarity. However, the remnants of their eerie experiences clung to them like the fog that enveloped the forest. As they gathered around the campfire for breakfast, the topic of conversation shifted to local lore and the recent disappearance of a hiker named Alex Johnson, who had gone missing just weeks before their arrival at Yosemite. "He was last seen around here," Mike said, his voice low, as he recounted the details from a park ranger's report he had read online. "They found his backpack near the Ravens Ridge Trail, but there's been no sign of him since." Sarah shivered involuntarily. "That's so creepy. What if something happened to him? What if we're camping in the same place?" "Maybe we should check it out," Jake suggested, his adventurous spirit reigniting as he leaned forward, excitement flickering in his eyes. "We could help look for clues or something. It could be, interesting." "Or dangerous," Emily interjected, her brow furrowing. "What if we run into trouble?" "Come on, Em," Tom coaxed, flashing her a reassuring smile. "We'll be careful. Besides, it might be fun to play detective for a day." Against their better judgment, but fueled by curiosity, the group decided to investigate the area where Alex was last seen. They packed their gear, the anticipation of an adventure outweighing their lingering fears. As they made their way toward the Ravens Ridge Trail, the atmosphere shifted once more. The trees stood taller and closer together, their branches intertwining above them like a natural cathedral, casting dark shadows that danced along the ground. Upon reaching the vicinity of the backpack's discovery, they found remnants of Alex's belongings scattered across a clearing. A tattered map lay crumpled at the base of a tree, along with a half-empty water bottle and a worn-out pair of hiking boots. Each item sent a chill through the group, an unsettling reminder of the danger that lurked in the wilderness. "Do you think he just got lost?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she picked up the map, her fingers brushing over the inked trails. "Or worse," Mike replied, his gaze scanning the area. "We need to keep our eyes peeled. This doesn't feel right." As they ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere thickened with tension. The air became heavy, saturated with the scent of damp earth and pine, as if the woods were holding their breath. Strange occurrences began to unfold. They noticed footprints in the mud, large, unmistakable marks that led nowhere. The prints seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving them bewildered. "What the hell?" Jake said, kneeling to examine the ground. "These look fresh. How can they just stop like that?" The others exchanged uneasy glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Just then, they were startled by the sound of distant laughter, a haunting, echoing giggle that danced through the trees, sending shivers down their spines. It was a sound that should have belonged to children playing in the sunlight, but instead, it reverberated like an eerie call to the lost. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible as she looked around in a panic. "It came from over there," Tom pointed toward a thick cluster of trees. "Let's not go any further," Sarah urged, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. "This isn't right. We need to go back to camp." But curiosity tugged at them, urging them to push forward. They moved cautiously, navigating through the underbrush as the laughter faded into an unsettling silence. The forest felt alive, shadows shifting as they passed, and the feeling of being watched intensified, prickling their skin like static electricity. As they ventured deeper, a sense of dread settled upon them like a heavy fog. The trees loomed above, their gnarled branches reaching out as if trying to ensnare them. Suddenly, they heard a voice, soft and desperate, echoing through the woods. "Help! Help me!" The cry was unmistakable, a plea that chilled them to their bones. "Did you hear that?" Jake said, his eyes wide with terror. "It's coming from over there," Emily exclaimed, pointing toward a narrow path shrouded in darkness. The friends hesitated, their hearts racing. "We should go back," Mike insisted, anxiety creeping into his voice. "It's probably a trick. It could be the spirit of that hiker." But the voice called again, louder this time, as if it were pleading directly to them. "Help me. I'm here." Without thinking, driven by a mix of fear and the instinct to save, they rushed toward the source of the sound. The path twisted and turned, becoming increasingly overgrown, until they finally reached a small clearing. They stopped dead in their tracks, their breath hitching in their throats. But there was no one there. The only sound that met them was silence, thick and suffocating, pressing down on them like a weight. The voice had vanished, leaving behind an echo that hung in the air. Where did it go?" Tom stammered, glancing around frantically. "I don't know," Jake replied, dread pooling in his stomach. "But we need to get out of here." As panic set in, the group turned on their heels, their instincts screaming at them to flee. They raced back through the forest, the shadows closing in around them, branches reaching like skeletal fingers grasping for them. The oppressive atmosphere grew heavier, and the laughter returned, taunting them as they ran. Bursting into the clearing where they had left their campsite, the friends stumbled to a halt, gasping for breath. The comfort of their campfire was extinguished by the weight of their experience, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on their faces. "We need to leave," Emily said, her voice shaky as she looked at each of her friends. "Now." Nods of agreement followed as they hurriedly began packing their belongings, their hands trembling. The thrill of adventure had morphed into a palpable fear, and the haunting specter of the vanishing hiker lingered in their minds, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the woods. As they hiked back to their car, the oppressive silence of the forest enveloped them, the air thick with tension. They could almost feel the eyes of the forest watching, waiting, as if it were reluctant to let them go. Once they reached the safety of the vehicle, a sense of relief washed over them, but it was tainted by the knowledge that something unexplainable had happened out there. A connection to a mystery they may never understand. As they drove away from Yosemite, the weight of their experiences pressed heavily upon them, a stark reminder that the wilderness held its secrets close, waiting for the next unsuspecting adventurers to wander into its depths. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the campsite, the group moved with a sense of urgency. The cheerful sounds of nature, which had once filled them with awe, now felt like a haunting reminder of their terrifying experiences. They packed their gear in silence, each friend lost in their thoughts, the weight of what they had encountered pressing heavily upon them. Jake was the first to break the silence. "I can't believe we let ourselves get pulled into all that. It was just supposed to be a fun trip." His voice trembled, reflecting the turmoil within. "Fun?" Sarah echoed, shaking her head as she tossed a sleeping bag into the trunk. "That was far from fun. It was terrifying. How could we have been so reckless?" "Maybe we were too caught up in the adventure," Mike said quietly, his eyes darting toward the trees as if expecting them to come alive again. "I thought we could handle it, but what if we weren't alone out there?" Tom, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I keep thinking about that voice we heard. What if it was him, the missing hiker? What if he's still out there?" His voice was low, laced with a mixture of fear and regret. A heavy silence settled over them again as they contemplated the unsettling possibility. Each friend had been touched by the mystery of the forest, a realization dawning that nature was a force far beyond their understanding. A beautiful facade that could easily turn deadly. As they climbed into the car and drove away from Yosemite, the landscape shifted outside their windows. The majestic peaks loomed in the distance, serene and peaceful, but a sense of foreboding lingered in the air. The once comforting beauty of the wilderness now felt ominous. The laughter and camaraderie of their trip had dissipated, replaced by an unsettling silence, the kind that wrapped around them like a shroud. They drove in silence, each of them lost in their own reflections. Jake glanced at his friends, trying to find some comfort in their shared experience. "You know," he began tentatively, "I think we learned something important. Nature can be beautiful, but it demands respect. We can't just treat it like a playground. We have to be aware of its dangers. Exactly, Sarah replied, looking out at the receding trees. We were so focused on having fun that we ignored the warnings. That's a lesson we won't forget anytime soon. Mike nodded in agreement. I think we were lucky. What if we hadn't made it back? What if those stories weren't just legends? His voice dropped, the gravity of their experiences evident. Let's promise each other, Emily said, her tone serious, that we'll always be careful when we're out in the wilderness from now on. No more wandering off the trails, no more ignoring the signs. The others nodded solemnly, the bond of their friendship solidified by the shared understanding of the dangers they had faced. They had ventured into the heart of nature's wild beauty, only to find its darker side waiting for them, shrouded in mystery. As they continued their journey, the car's interior felt heavy with unspoken fears and lingering questions. They had left Yosemite, but the experiences would haunt them forever, woven into the fabric of their lives. Would they ever truly escape the memories of the whispering pines, the shadowy figures, and the haunting cries of the missing hiker? Each friend knew that, no matter how far they traveled, the lessons learned would forever be etched in their minds. In the distance, as they neared the park's exit, the camera panned back toward the campsite they had just abandoned. The flickering flames of their campfire had long been extinguished, leaving only a pile of ashes behind. But as the camera zoomed in on the grove of pine trees, a soft whisper began to rise, echoing through the stillness of the woods. The whispers grew louder, intertwining with the rustling leaves, hinting that the forest's mysteries were far from solved. As the screen faded to black, the haunting echoes of laughter and the chilling cries of the forest lingered, a stark reminder that nature holds its secrets tightly, waiting for the next curious adventurers to stumble into its embrace. The dangers of the wilderness were not just tales to be told. They were alive, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the unsuspecting to cross their threshold once again.